and thank you all for your patience as we have all been up and down and back and forth today during this hearing. But as a Tennessean, this is a very important hearing to us, protecting against infringement and IP theft from the CCP and from Chinese companies. And see, we see it not only in music, which the music industry loses about $12.5 billion a year because of this, but concert merchandise, a sport team merchandise, you see it in guitars, you see it in aftermarket auto parts, and in some of the patents that are held for new eco-friendly automobile engines and different things. So it is a frustration. And I think one of the things, and I'm glad that Senator Hirono mentioned the PTAB process, because this is frustrating to see companies like ByteDance with TikTok using PTAB, seeing Huawei, ZTE using PTAB, and filing their complaints. And Ms. Harrison, you touched on this with getting things in order and strengthening our process. So I'd like to start with you. If you were sitting here and you said, these are the things that we need to do because this is costing us billions and billions, tens of billions of dollars every single year. So what are the three things that you would first and foremost do?
Thank you very much for that question, Senator. I think the first thing I would do is that I would ensure that every government agency that deals with IP in the government has the same view and is employing the same yardstick to measure success.
So
which is
consistency
across all agencies,
Okay.
and that national security and economic and technological competitiveness are the metric we should be using. Two, I think that we have long held and allowed the judiciary to make decisions about intellectual property cases, oftentimes by the time they go to the Supreme Court, they're corner cases, that have been informing our innovation policy. That is not the appropriate place for innovation policy to happen. I think Congress should take a very proactive approach in deciding how we want to use our innovation ecosystem to our economic advantage. That would be the second thing. And the third thing would be to look at all of our choices, PTAB, the USPTO, other things, and say, are we holistically achieving what we're trying to do? We have 200 plus years of an intellectual property system that we have been making incremental changes to over time, and no one has looked at the entire system and says, does it meet our needs? Why don't we take a new look and actually come up with some comprehensive viewpoints about what is required for this new metric?
Okay, anyone else want to add something to that? Mr. Cohen?
Thank you, Senator. It's an excellent question and obviously one that's hotly debated. Just a few observations. One is that I think when it comes to issues involving state actors, particularly from China, PTAB proceedings, I think it's very difficult for ALJs to balance those foreign policy interests, to recognize what is the significance of a state-owned enterprise, to recognize whether a particular industry in the United States might be targeted. I think those kinds of issues might be more appropriately decided by a Article III judge, just due to the complexity and the fact that it extends beyond the narrow confines of a patent. I would also note that with regard to these concerns about the real party of interest or standing issues in PTAB proceedings, that there is a phenomenon in China in IP, and frequently Chinese phenomena appear in the US where sometimes there's artificial litigation or straw man litigation in administrative proceedings. Artificial litigation is a case where the parties are not really adverse. They want the court to make a decision that would benefit one of them, perhaps a plaintiff or or perhaps a defendant. I sometimes wonder whether the Huawei versus ZTE case in the EU involving standards essential patents may have been an artificial case in order to obtain a certain decision from the European Union that would benefit China, in Europe, the United States, and other
Okay,
markets.
in that regard, let me ask you this. Last year, the WHO gave a TRIPS waiver when it came to manufacturing COVID vaccines. What kind of, or do you see it as a wet blanket, or do you see that as unfriendly to fostering innovation? If somebody producing a vaccine without the rights holder being able to take that and move forward.
Yeah, I think earlier in this panel, we were tallied for who supported that. I think no one raised their hands, both with the respect to the TRIPS waiver and the proposed extension to diagnostics and therapeutics. Obviously unfriendly to IP rights, and also a door opener to a range of other concerns, whether it's green technology, non-COVID vaccines, or certain forms of technology that may have other applications other than in dealing with a pandemic. Addressing the pandemic itself, obviously an international public health concern, and the remedies for that are not limited to and not necessarily dependent upon violating our IP rights.
Right. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.